Hi there again, everyone. Welcome back. Oh, have I been looking forward to this one. This is a story that I love. Well, at least one movie version that I kind of grew up on and especially love and wanted to expand it and see all the other versions. And you get to come along with me. Lucky you. So, to the point. This is about Father of the Bride. There have been to date 4 different versions if you count the original novel. There was a book, there was a movie, there was a movie, there was a movie. Now I'm going to take you through them all. I was going to say quickly take you through them all, but I don't think it's going to be that quick. I'm sorry. I'll be as quick as long-winded me can be. I promise. And we'll note the similarities, the differences, and which ones I personally recommend. Let's go. The book, which I do not own. I had to interlibrary loan it, and then I had to return it right away after reading it, so here you go. Written by Edward Streeter, published 1949 by Simon & Schuster. Illustrated by Glyas Williams, who was a syndicated cartoonist. His work appeared in newspapers and magazines such as The New York and Collier's. As for Streeter, he was born in 1891 in Buffalo. He served in the First World War, at which time he had a syndicated column which revolved around fictional humorous letters from a soldier writing home. A businessman, first and foremost, he was vice president of the Fifth Avenue Bank in New York City for 28 years, while pursuing writing part-time. Short stories and magazine articles led to novels. Other works include Daily Except Sundays, Mr. Hobbs Takes a Vacation, and Chairman of the Board. There are also 2 nonfiction works based on his travels in Europe and a somewhat autobiographical novel published in 1969. He passed away in 1976 and was buried in Buffalo. Now, the novel is light, charming, and still moderately funny. Its style reminded me of Robert Benchley. Incidentally, Glyas Williams also illustrated some Benchley. So, to the plot. We follow middle-class, white-bread, pretty much 50s era father Stanley Banks and his eldest daughter Kay. They are the focus of the story. Kay is, I believe to the best of my recollection, around 24, which is pretty old for an unmarried gal of the time. She casually breaks the news of her impending engagement over the breakfast table, which in turn leads to the impending nuptials, escalates rapidly through the nuptials themselves and into the aftermath that is the wedding reception. The plot is not overcomplicated and is told in a straightforward style, like he did this, she said that, etc. Stanley Banks is the generic businessman of the time who commutes to the city by train and then comes home to the suburbs to his beloved family, consisting here of wife Ellie, eldest daughter Kay, and his 2 younger sons. There's some key scenes which I will cover. Stanley's reaction when told of his daughter's engagement, the arrival of the prospective son-in-law, Buckley Dunstan, Stanley and Ellie's going to the in-laws' home to meet them, the hiring of the snooty wedding coordinator, the engagement party at the Banks' house, a wedding rehearsal at the church where no one, at least to Stanley, seems to know what they're doing, a steady trickle of wedding gifts, with one particularly horrid one because it seems there's always one. And the novel doesn't sound too bad. It's like a china figure with 2 couples crossing a bridge. The family argument over who to invite, the remodel of the house to accommodate the reception. There's another argument between the betrothed couple, which almost leads to the wedding getting called off. I do not remember the circumstances of that argument in the book. The smooth sailing that is the wedding itself. The controlled chaos that is the wedding reception. His daughter's calling him just after leaving for her honeymoon. And the days as Stanley and Ellie sit in the aftermath and try to process everything. In the novel, there is also a point where Stanley offers his daughter money if she will elope instead, and modern-day readers will probably raise an eyebrow at Stanley's continued consumption of old fashions, the drink. But then remember, this is the proto-50s, and alcohol was very much a part of the modern-day culture, with cocktail parties, the ever-present drink card, etc. In the book, Kay's dialogue uses a lot of italics, which some reviewers complained as an example of policing women's tone. However, I was reading it as more the youngster telling the oldster, this is how it is, you don't understand. Something that has happened with pretty much every generation, and always will, I'm sure. By and large, the other characters are underdeveloped, but then it is a short novel, and it is about the father of the bride. And one of my favorite lines, to paraphrase, he knew he'd never remember what Ellie wore, but he also knew he'd never forget the way she looked. Originated in the book. Overall, the novel is surprisingly light on sentiment, considering the subject matter. It concentrates more on the shindig and the effect on the title character, and the charmingly comedic occurrences and observations about this everyday event. I recommend it as a pleasant time passer, and it's definitely interesting if you want to see where it all began. Father of the Bride, the 1950 film version. Hollywood wasted no time in optioning this one. Francis Goodrich and Albert Hackett adapted the screenplay for Vincent Minnelli's direction, but the spotlight here is on said father, here essayed by the eternally capable Spencer Tracy and the luminous just out of teenagerdom Elizabeth Taylor. Other notable cast members are Joan Bennett as Ellie, Billy Burke and Maroni Olson as the in-laws, Leo G. Carroll as Mr. Missoula, the wedding coordinator, and also Russ, here Rusty, Tamblyn, is the younger son, Tommy. So, first off, Stanley Banks is a lawyer, and all the action takes place around the home, so his work doesn't figure in much. Kay is, I believe, 20, which I feel better reflects the heavy pro-marriage feeling at the time. 24 would have been considered an old maid. Things proceed much as in the book in many ways. There's a casual announcement at the table, Stanley's dislike of Buckley's name, it is a heck of a name, the meeting with the in-laws. As in the book, Stanley drinks too much and ends up also talking too much about himself. The engagement party is similar to the book, but in the book, Stanley eventually gets a break from making drinks and is able to mingle, although not too successfully. Here he gets trapped in the kitchen the entire time. He does try to convince his daughter to elope, and also the wedding gifts begin to multiply, here centered around the horrid present, which is, in the paraphrased words of the immortal Alan Sherman, a lady with a clock where her stomach ought to be. Stanley tries on his old tuxedo, which proves not to fit, to the point of getting destroyed while the house is being remodeled, and he has to get a new one. The betrothed squirrel. I forget what they fought over in the book, but here it is because Buckley wants their honeymoon to be a fishing trip in Nova Scotia, an idea which Kay is not too keen on. We have the super chaotic rehearsal, the remodel of the house, and the wedding itself where somehow everything sails along just fine. Stanley has the role of giving the bride away and nearly forgets his line as in the book, but pulls it off in time. During the super-packed reception, he keeps trying to track down his daughter for a goodbye kiss, but is never able to get to her before she moves on. This makes her calling him before she takes off extra special. In the book, Stanley and Ellie sit and rest before grabbing the vacuum and setting to cleaning up. Here they just share a little time together. Perhaps most importantly, with the visual medium, we have the big reveal of the bride in her wedding dress. It is a spectacular shot indeed, and something that will pop up first in your head when you hear the movie title. I did point out that the novel wasn't heavy on sentimentality, but the movie fleshes this out more from necessity's sake. Stanley and Kay are shown to be a loving, if sometimes at odds, father and daughter, and Stanley and Ellie make a good couple, even if Joan Bennett is criminally underused, but then again, it's the nature of the story. There's more here than in the book, but not so much more as I would like there to be. Still, it's an amusing romp with heart, and I do recommend you watch it, especially for the performances of Tracy and Taylor. That's Elizabeth, not Dawn Taylor, who played Buckley. Side note, Elizabeth Taylor's first marriage occurred around this time, and the studio eagerly jumped on this bit of kismet to expand their marketing of the film. The sequel, Father's Little Dividend, about the child born of the first movie's nuptials, rushed into filming so that it could be released 10 months afterward. This time, however, real life did not mirror fiction. Taylor was reportedly abused by her husband and got a divorce. Father of the Bride, 1991. A big one for my generation. I was 12 when this came out and was just nuts about it. The screenplay was updated from the 1950s version by Nancy Myers, with input from director Charles Shire. Names have been updated to reflect the times. This stars Steve Martin as George Banks, Kimberly Williams as daughter Annie Banks, and Diane Keaton as wife Nina. There is only one son here, the surprise baby Maddie, played by Kieran Culkin. We also have the truly memorable performance of Martin Short as Frank Egelhofer, the wedding coordinator. B.D. Wong, always a treat, that man, as his assistant Howard Weinstein. Also George Newbern as fiancé Ryan McKenzie, with his parents being played by Peter Michael Getz and Kate McGregor Stewart. Sidebar, I was re-watching this film for YouTube video purposes when I realized Kate McGregor Stewart is also in The Addams Family and Scrooged. The names are not the only thing updated for the 90s. George runs a sneaker company. Annie is 22 and has been away at college getting her architectural degree. Nina also runs a business which I believe is in interior design, but we don't get to hear much about this, or find out who cleans their spacious house if everyone has other jobs. Annie gives her announcement at the dinner table, but here the shock in George's feeling of abandonment is compounded by the fact that she's just arrived home. As for the Banks' house, it is absolutely gorgeous and akin to the house in the first film. Another recurring motif is Stanley/George's insistence that the in-laws are probably poor and will have to be supported, until he discovers that they are richer than he is. George also tries on his old tuxedo, which rips in the same exact way as in the first film. Nice homage. There is no engagement party in this film, but there is the family argument over who to invite. Annie and Ryan have their fight, which I find actually a bit clever. He gives her a blender, which he sees as being too 50s, an oblique nod to the original film. Also, as in the original film, we have the horrid gift being the lady with a clock where her stomach ought to be. There is no wedding rehearsal scene, but the wedding does go as much as in the first movie. At the reception, George again tries to make it to his daughter to say goodbye, but he never gets there in time. She calls while she's waiting for her plane, and they have a moment. And then he and Nina dance in the wreckage of their home. Differences here are mainly because of the casting. Spencer Tracy is quite a different actor than Steve Martin, and we have a lot of space made for wild and crazy guy Martinisms, including his snooping around the house of the in-laws, attempting to find evidence of wrongdoing, and also his being overwhelmed by stress, causing a scene at the supermarket and ending in jail. There's also ample room for Shorts' shenanigans, which you're probably either going to love or hate. Annie is a modern woman for the time, a career gal who enjoys shooting hoops in the driveway. At the same time, there's a lot of tradition here still, with Martin's idea of a simple backyard wedding, which looks kind of awesome. I mean, a bride burger and a groom burger? Sign me up. Being shut down in favor of what is basically a bridal boutique explosion in their house. And also there's the fact that Annie lives at home until she gets married, which I only realized on rewatch and it struck me as weird, like, it's the 90s for crying out loud. We do still have that spectacular line about not remembering what Nina wore that day, and we have another callback to the first film with that amazing wedding dress reveal. There's even more character depth and heartfelt sentimentality, real emotion without getting deeper than necessary. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll go, aww. Now I can't help but recommend this one as it attacked me full on in my formative years as it did for so many of us. And it absolutely destroyed my generation with its definition of this is how a wedding ought to be. I love this movie so much still, but it must be noted that you do not need all the stuff. Father of the Bride 2022. I actually did not know this one existed. I was nearly set to put out this video when I happened to learn of a new version and had to go watch that one. Matt Lopez went back to the original novel for his adaptation, and Gaz Lazariki, I'm so sorry, was director. A Cuban-American take, and please forgive me in advance for mispronouncing any names. This stars Andy Garcia as Billy Herrera, Gloria Estefan as his wife Ingrid Herrera, Adria Arjona as bride Sofia, and Isabella Merced as her younger sister Cora. We also have Diego Boneta as fiancé Adan Castillo, and Pedro Damian as in-law Hernan Castillo, Macarena Achaga as his wife Julieta Castillo, and Laura Haring as his ex-wife Marcela Castillo. Chloe Feynman portrays the very white girl wedding coordinator Natalie Vance, with Casey Thomas Brown in a memorable bit as her assistant Kyler. Matt Walsh also pops up in the beginning as a counselor. Okay, so I'm skeptical of remakes for remakes' sake, and I would be more so of the 90s if it wasn't for that pesky nostalgia, a fact I try to be aware of. However, there is no denying that the meat of this story is heavily universal, so I was very excited to see a non-white bread take. The story, set in California in at least the 90s one, has been relocated to Miami. Billy Herrera, a traditional type of fellow, is also an architect and self-made man who does not hesitate to break into the well-worn and often embellished story of how he came to this country and built himself up. He even built the family home, an impressive maison with classic and heritage touches, and an absolutely gorgeous backyard. As in the 90s one, the bride comes home from college, here it's law school, and breaks the news at the table, with only her father being shocked into disapproval. If nothing else, his daughter did the proposing. He is less than impressed with the fiancé, not harping on his name here so much as the fact that he's Mexican, and also not a man's man, as it were. Here the in-laws come to visit, although it also proves that they are richer than Billy. However, all of them agree that the wedding should be big, the very last thing the couple themselves want. As with Short in the 90s version, I'm on the love side of his performance, okay. Feynman's annoying wedding coordinator is a fantastic bit of hilarity. It's worth mentioning here, though, that all characters have depth and humanity, and hers is no exception. Now, from what little this tiny, sheltered white girl knows, Hispanic and Latino families tend to be more close and involved with each other than white bread ones. And here that is demonstrated fully. The entire family is far more involved in all aspects of the wedding than in the other versions. Sister Cora is given her due as a wannabe fashion designer, and ends up designing the wedding outfits, including the bridal dress. There is no big reveal here, but then it's shown over and over that this isn't the traditional wedding timeline in general. In fact, instead of the father having costume issues, as it were, the issues here are transferred to the bride's dress. On the day of the wedding, a storm destroys the only bridge leading to the wedding venue, and the entire family pitches in to set up an impromptu ceremony and reception in the Herrera's backyard, which it is somewhat unbelievable, but they make you believe that it would work. The main difference to this movie, and this is very interesting, I think, right at the beginning, we meet Billy and Ingrid in marriage counseling. Their relationship is falling apart, with Ingrid feeling sidelined over all the years, which I feel is also a nod to the wife getting sidelined through every version of the story so far. They are going to tell their daughters, but instead get interrupted by Sophia's reveal of her engagement, and decide to keep their announcement a secret until after the wedding. This is what takes the place of the argument between the betrothed couple. When the news is accidentally revealed early, Sophia is angry that they kept it from her. Naturally, it is the course of events that not only makes Billy come around to his daughter being grown up and ready to leave the fold, but here he also realizes he needs to grow and change. He not only apologizes to his daughter, but to everyone, and especially to his wife, and they reconcile at the end just as you want them to. I heartily recommend this one. I was not expecting to need tissues, but here we are. Here we are indeed. Okay, that was a bit of a deep dive, but 4 versions of the story, and each of them has their points. Always think it's fascinating of the different ways in which you can tell a story. And I do believe that there's no real point to retelling a story, making a remake, unless you're going to tell the story in a different way, unless you're going to say something that wasn't said before. And these all pull that off. So have you seen any of these, and what did you think? Let me know in the comments. Are there any other stories out there where you would like to see a takedown of the different versions? Please also put those in the comments. And no matter what, I hope you have a good next week. I will see you next time. Until then, please do take care of yourselves and each other. Drink more water and know that you are cared about sincerely. Bye now.